Hello, seventh graders. We are starting a new unit, and this unit will be all about the book The Giver by Lois Lowry. And in order to understand a book, we often have to understand the background and issues that the book has in it, and that is what we call the context of the book. And in this case, there's this big concept called utopia. And we are going to look at that today. And our learning goal is that you are going to answer all these different types of questions that I have for you and support your answers with text if you need to. But most of it is right from your reading. And just remember that when I pause for you to answer, if you need more time, you can hit the pause button and then continue. So we begin with the question you're looking for is, what is the setting of The Giver, and what is its genre, and what does that mean? Remember, genre is the type of literature. So the setting of The Giver, that is the specific time and place in which it occurs, is not clearly defined. Instead, it occupies an imagined world. The Giver is considered science fiction, highly imaginative writing that contains fantastic elements based on scientific principles, discoveries, or laws. Science fiction allows writers to suspend or alter certain elements of reality in order to create fascinating and sometimes instructive alternatives. Okay, so if you have finished with number 1, we will move on. Number 2, you're looking for the definition of utopia. Remember, quite often, a definition is best learned if it's in your own words. Imagine a world free of suffering and inequality, a world in which war is unknown and everyone lives in harmony. Can such a place exist in real life? Great thinkers over the centuries have believed it is possible and have attempted to design their own ideal societies or utopias. The term utopia derived from Greek words meaning good place and no place. Was coined in the 1500s by Sir Thomas More in his novel Utopia. The concept, however, was around long before More's time. So now you have your definition of utopia. Number 3, during the 3rd century BC, Greek philosopher Plato outlined an ideal society. What was the name of his book? And list 3 positive things about its society. One of the first people to create a vision of a utopian society was the Greek philosopher Plato, writing in the 3rd century BC. In his book, The Republic, he outlines an ideal society divided neatly into 3 classes: the philosophers, the warriors, and the commoners. The philosophers and the warriors would be the guardians of the state, leading a life without luxury so that the commoners would not envy their power. The commoners would each be assigned an occupation that is best suited for him or her, so that everyone would live in peace. No one would want for anything because everyone's needs would be met. Okay, so next, number 4, you're going to find 3 negative things about Plato's society. Plato's perfect world did have a dark side, however. The rulers, he believed, had a responsibility to keep some secrets from the people in the interest of creating the best possible society. For example, no one would know that the children of the higher classes were being selectively bred, like animals, to encourage the most advantageous traits. Parenting would be permitted only through a lottery system, so that some people considered undesirable would be prevented from having children. Those so-called undesirables would be made to believe it was their own bad luck and not the will of the state that denied them that right. Children who were considered inferior or who were deformed in some way would simply be taken away to some mysterious unknown place so that they would not taint the pure society. Information would be controlled in many other ways as well. For example, texts for schools would be strictly censored so that the children could not be exposed to ideas that were not good for them. So while Plato's perfect society looked perfect on the outside, ugly things were happening in secret. And again, pause if you need more time. Moving on to number 5, you're going to find the name of the Massachusetts utopia. List one good thing about the society and one negative thing about the society. Through the ages, people have attempted to set up real utopian communities around the world. Amos Bronson Alcott wanted to create a spiritual community untouched by society and its evils. In 1842, he began Fruitlands, a farm near Harvard, Massachusetts. The rules at Fruitlands were strict, allowing no animals for labor and no animal products. The community was designed to be self-sufficient, so members could only eat what they grew. Eventually, the community disintegrated, as it was impossible to grow enough food for everyone without the help of animals. Louisa May Alcott, daughter of the community's founder, wrote about the doomed experiment in her short story, Transcendental Wild Oats. Okay, moving on. Number 6. Here, all you have to do is fill in the blanks to complete this profound quote. And I'm going to start reading, and I bet you can find what words belong in those blanks. One might say that the trouble with utopian societies let me start over. One might say that the trouble with utopian societies is that in order to maintain harmony and perfection, certain freedoms and certain individuals must be eliminated. A number of well-known science fiction novels, including 1984 by George Orwell, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, have explored the faults and falsehoods of utopia. So now the quote, one might say that the trouble with utopian societies is that in order to maintain blank and blank, certain blank and certain blank must be eliminated. Now to number 7. What is one perfect thing about the Giver's Society? What is one not so perfect thing about the society? So now we move on to our story, The Giver. The Giver also presents a utopia that isn't as perfect as it might seem at first glance. To everyone in Jonas's community, life is good. There is no crime, suffering, or serious conflict. Anyone who disrupts this peaceful, predictable way of life is released, free to go elsewhere. Differences of race, religion, and ideology do not exist. Jonas begins to see the dark side of this utopian society as he learns from the old man he knows as the Giver. Okay, now I'm going to take you through some of the answers that you should have gone through and answered so you can check your own work. Um, this one says, what is the setting of the giver? And this is not clearly defined. So, in other words, we don't really know. Is it the past, present, future? Is it America? Is it even Earth? We just don't know. So you're going to have to look for clues as you read to figure that out for yourself. The next question was, what is its genre and what does that mean? Well, the genre is science fiction, and I highlighted that entire section because you could have had anything in that section to support what science fiction is all about. Just so we know that it's all imagination, it means it's all fake, but it's based on these elements of science. So these things feel like they could happen. Typically in the future, if we got smarter on science, we would be able to develop these things. They also like to suspend reality. So, like, teleportation or, some kind of weird thing that we can't even really do. They want to use just to show that, maybe it could happen one day. And they also use a lot of these just to teach us a lesson, like what would happen if we did this kind of stuff. Okay, so now to the definition of utopia. So this is pretty important because obviously we have to understand a utopian society if we're going to understand the giver's world. So utopia means an ideal society. You could say something like a perfect world. It is from the Greek words meaning good place and no place. And that just means that it can't exist because it's too hard to be that good. So, yes, people try to set up this perfect world, but no matter what you do, you're going to make someone unhappy. So, it's just not, perfection isn't going to be obtained. Okay, and then we talked a little bit about Plato. And a long, long time ago, in the 3rd century BC, he wrote this book. And so he's kind of like the grandfather of what we consider utopian philosophy. And he came up with this book, The Republic. And in The Republic, he has some positive things. So I listed that there's no jealousy between the classes, that commoners are assigned jobs that's best suited to them, and that all their needs are met. So when you think about it, yes, it would be awesome if I wouldn't be jealous of some rich, powerful person while I'm just like, measly working in our community. Or if I know the job I'm doing is what's best suited for me, that's going to make me feel more fulfilled. And then, of course, if I have all my needs met, I won't even have to worry about, like, if I don't like my job, right? Because I'm getting my food and shelter and all that just given to me. So it just feels like I'm supporting my culture, and that would just make me happy. And then we have some of the negatives. Now, I just highlighted the negatives because there are quite a few of them, and I can just talk you through maybe what you found as well. First of all, there's some secrecy. Like we said, in a utopian society, some people are going to be unhappy. And so, one way to hide that is just to not tell them. And those secrets are just kept to like the most powerful. And that just even gives them more power because they know secrets. And then you think about the children of the higher classes being selectively bred. And of course, we think of having children out of love as one of our, rights as human beings, that I can have as many children as I want and all this. Well, now the society is limiting who's even having children and what traits they're going to have. So it's not even about, a father and a mother. It's probably more about science, meaning that they use genetic engineering to create embryos that would create the traits of their society that they really wanted. And then, of course, having people who are undesirable, preventing them from having children, that's limiting their rights. It's keeping them in their place, like as workers, probably. And again, kind of treating the higher classes with more power because they're the ones that get to raise children, kind of shows the lower classes that they're not as important. And then children who were happened to be inferior or deformed in some way, maybe that genetic engineering didn't work out like it should, they would be taken away into this mysterious unknown place. In other words, you just never saw them again. And so we don't know exactly what would happen to them, but it's out of their community, so it's out of their hair, and they don't have to worry about it anymore. And that is why they have this pure society. So they would never have to worry about having some deformity continue throughout their society through who's having children or whatever. It's just wiped out permanently. And then, of course, schools. That's an important part of a society, and what we teach our children is our beliefs in our society. So by limiting the texts that are taught in a school, that's one way to control what people learn and what people think. So these children are only learning what the government thinks is important. So in all, the things that are done here in secret, like the powerful get to decide, is what makes this idea of the republic is maybe not such a great utopia. Okay, so now going on to number 5, you should have found the name of the utopia from Massachusetts called Fruitlands. And one good thing about the society is that there was no animals for labor and no animal products. They were designed to be self-sufficient, and they would eat what they would grow. So like zero waste. They were way ahead of their times. Like this was like the first vegan culture, They were super respectful to the land and to the animals, and they wouldn't eat more than they could produce. And, it was in theory, a good idea. But like a lot of good societies that are built on theory, they found some problems because this was back before tractors. So they did not have any machines that could help them create large crops to feed their population. I'm not even sure how many people lived in this community at this time period. Probably not a lot. But even if it was like 100 people, you would have to have a lot of acres of food, of like a garden to feed all these people. And without animals to help plow and harvest, it just became too hard, and they almost starved. And that is why they had to disband and go back to normal society. Now, fun fact, Louisa May Alcott was a very famous American author. You might have heard, she wrote the book Little Women. It's a very famous book about a family of girls and and they just are very interesting characters. So that is, she grew up in that kind of culture. Now, moving on. So this is turning now kind of towards the dark side of utopian societies. In order for them to maintain harmony and perfection, certain freedoms and certain individuals must be eliminated. Let that sink in for a second, because what that's saying is, in order to feel like a perfect society, I have to take away your freedom. I have to take away certain individuals that would not or could not follow my idea of what is perfection. So, it's scary to think that government can have that much control over people, but they can. Like when we eliminate people from our society by putting them in jail, or deporting them to a different country. We are, in essence, doing this. Like, we are removing individuals. And then you have to question, well, are we also removing freedoms? Even you could talk about wearing masks. Is that we're trying to create a utopian society and that we don't want everyone to get sick and die. So we're trying to tell you to wear masks, but that's also eliminating some of your freedom. So which is more important, society or individual? So that's going to be a very important theme as we read this story. And now the other stories, again, just fun facts. These are all very famous books that you might want to check out. But the one you might understand is Ray Bradbury, because he was the author of that story, All Summer in a Day. So if you like that story, you like the way he wrote, you like that little twist he likes to put into his stories, you might like this book, for Fahrenheit 451. All right, and then last, we're going back to The Giver here. One of the perfect things about The Giver Society is that there's no crime, suffering, or serious conflict. Anyone who disrupts the peaceful, predictable way of life is released, free to go elsewhere. So again, like talking about the Republic, and even Fruitlands, they are trying to establish what they consider to be perfection. And with that, you have to start questioning, well, what are they eliminating? What freedoms are they taking away from people? And obviously, the people who are not following their idea of perfection are those that are going to be released elsewhere. So that's something that you'll have to watch for as you read. And then the one not so perfect thing, which kind of is what I just said about, being released elsewhere, is perhaps that there are no differences of race, religion, and ideology. But hearing that, you might say, well, what's so wrong with that? I mean, there's a lot of disturbances right now when people are looking at the inequalities of race and religion, and ideology means like different ideas. And if we got rid of all those different things, would we be happy? And so that's the question. If we all had one race, if we all kind of looked the same, would we be happier? Would it be better? Would it be better if we all had one religion? No one would have any differences. Like some of our religious wars wouldn't happen because everyone would believe the same thing. And then ideology, like look at our politics right now. People are fighting more than ever because they have different ideas. If we all believe the same thing, we wouldn't have to even have a political party. We would all be able to support the government in the same way because we would all agree with each other. So even though we label that as a not so great thing, is it? That's something else you need to think about as you read The Giver. So you can see that this book is not going to be just a quick, easy read. There's going to be a lot of major elements that you will have to think about in conflict and character and theme. And this idea of science fiction playing a part in this story. But the big one, too, is just utopia. As you read, consider how Lois Lowry created this perfect society they call it the community. And what are they doing to make it perfect? And then as a reader, just question it. Is it really perfect? What would you change? What would you like about it? Okay, and then pretty soon you're going to start reading chapter 1. Make sure to talk to your teacher if you have any questions about what you've learned here today or as you continue reading the story. Thanks.